All right, so our next unit in international foods is going to be on China. So let's get right into it. Um, so for a really long time, Chinese cuisine in the United States, for the most part, was represented by Americanized Chinese dishes like chow mein and chop suey, made by Chinese immigrants in ways that would cater to the American palate, right? A lot of that came from old school for us, especially on the West Coast. It came from old school San Francisco or Oakland, Chinatown, because that was a big cultural hub for Chinese immigrants. So a lot of our understanding, or at least our old understanding of what Chinese food was, comes from that area. But more recently, the American public has come to appreciate and respect the flavor and appearance of like really true Chinese cuisine. And the more we learned about that, the more we understood that there's not like one representative Chinese cuisine, right? China's huge, and there's a lot of independent regions in that area that have different cuisines based on their geography or their climate, right? So each of these cuisines in those regions reflect the cultural and the culinary heritage of that place that they're from. Okay, so if we look at a map of China, it's not hard to understand why there's such a large variety of cooking styles. China covers basically 4 million square miles and it borders 11 nations. Okay, so the climate and geography varies greatly across the whole country. We're going to focus on four big regions of China and we're going to somewhat generalize those regions. So just bear with me, but we are going to make some conclusions about how Chinese food is different across the country, right? In the north, we're going to focus on Beijing or Peking style food. In the east, we're going to focus on Shanghainese or Hu cuisine. In the west, it looks like central, but in western China, we're going to focus on Sichuan cuisine. And then in the south, we're going to focus on Cantonese cuisine from cities like Guangzhou or Hong Kong. Okay? Those are the four big regions we're going to get into. So the first one is going to be Peking cuisine, right? In the north, rice isn't necessarily the staple. They use a lot of wheat flour. Okay, so there's like noodle dishes, there's steamed breads, there's dumplings, there's pancakes, stuff like that. Okay, northern food tends to be lighter than food from other areas, other regions, and they focus on the flavor profile of pungent sweet and sour dishes a lot and delicately seasoned foods. Okay, there's a lot of use of garlic and scallion. And if we go back and look at the map, you can see the north is has a large border with Mongolia, so there are some Mongolian influences with some of their cooking techniques or cooking equipment. Okay, so some Mongolian stuff has uh, emerged in their cooking style. The first thing we're going to talk about is Peking duck. I think most of us have heard about this before, but it's a special preparation of roasting duck that gives it a really crispy skin. Okay, the meat and the skin are really expertly carved after it's cooked. You can look right there. You can see someone who knows exactly what they're doing is carving that duck, and it's usually eaten with a Chinese pancake and cucumbers and scallions, or these are leeks, so some type of green onion variety, and then hoisin sauce or chili sauce or sesame sauce, something like that. But I find it most common to be with hoisin sauce. Okay. They can get the skin really crispy because it's a really interesting technique. I'll probably post a video of it. They use an air gun and they'll put the air gun in between the skin and the meat of the duck, and they'll blow the duck up like a balloon, and that's going to release the skin from the meat and allow the skin to render fat really evenly and fully. And in their ovens, they cook it for like an hour in this kind of oven you hang it into. The skin gets super crispy. So very delicious. And this is a northern thing. Again, I said we're going to kind of generalize. So hot and sour soup is northern, but it's also championed by other regions. So this soup is claimed by both Beijing and Sichuan. Hot and sour soup is usually meat based and is made with things like lily bud and wood ear fungus and bamboo shoots and tofu, right? Red or white pepper can be used. So white pepper is like the regular peppercorns we kind of think of, but it's a different variety of it. And then red peppers are things like chilies, right? And then to make it sour, they use vinegar, usually Chin King vinegar, which is that black vinegar, or sometimes they might use a different type. Okay, we'll go over that a little bit later. But hot and sour soup. Okay, Jiangmian. This, I think the literal translation means noodles with fried sauce. But what it is a noodle dish that's topped with either a pork or beef based sauce. And the sauce is made with Chinese yellow soybean paste. Okay. I will be making this on Monday and I'll demo it so we can all see it. But again, we talked about how the North is not necessarily rice based, but based in stuff with wheat flour. So lots of noodle dishes. And this is a big one. Okay. Really tasty. We'll talk about all the different types of Chinese soy paste near the end of this video, but this one uses the yellow soybean paste. Remember that. Okay, so in the east, we have Shanghai. So in the north, we talked about wheat flour. Here in the east, it's more rice focused. Okay, the cooks on the east side use more soy sauce and sugar, and they specialize in like salty and gravy laden dishes. Okay, there's lots of vegetables. It's a very lush place, so vegetables are abundant, and they have a wide range of seafood because they're on the coast. Okay, they say that in the east they make some of the best soy sauce in China, and therefore their cooking has a lot of red cooking, which means things that are stewed in soy sauce bases. Okay, so the first thing we'll look at is one of those red cooked or red braised dishes, hong xiao rou, which is a red braised pork belly. And red braised means it's cooked in the soy sauce liquid again. So it's a braised pork belly dish that's seasoned with light and dark soy sauce. We'll talk about the types of soy sauce near the end. There's usually rice wine in there, and the type Chinese rice wine is called Shaoxing rice wine, and we'll talk about that later. Sugar, star anise, ginger, garlic, and usually chilies are in there, right? So very tasty, fatty, a little bit sweet, a little bit spicy, and then spiced with star anise. Okay, you eat it with rice, super tasty. This is something you'll find a lot on American Chinese restaurant menus. Red braised pork is usually there. Okay, I think a lot of us have had or seen soup dumplings before. So this is another thing that you can find in the East. Again, we're generalizing. Everybody has dumplings in China, but when I think of like crab and pork meat soup dumplings, we're thinking about Shanghai. Okay, so they're usually filled in the East with crab and pork meat, and then a fortified broth. So the way they get that hot liquid inside of that dumpling is they have a really um, gelatinous broth that when you cool it down, it's solid, right? So you can shave it or mince it up and mix that into your meat and crab filling and put that into the dumpling skin. Okay. They're not always pork and crab. There's some that are just pork, and then other people obviously use other things. But I think the most common one, or the one that I think of the most, is the crab meat soup dumplings, crab, pork, and the broth. Okay. So when you bite into this, there's a steaming hot broth that shoots out. So usually you have to kind of cool it down a little bit before you eat a fresh soup dumpling. What I do when I eat them is I just sit them in the black vinegar. They're served with black vinegar and sometimes ginger to refresh. And what I do is I just sit them in that little dish of black vinegar for a few seconds and they cool down, and that's how I eat them. Um, Here in the Seattle area, we have a couple Din Tai Fung locations, so you probably heard of Din Tai Fung before. From what I hear, they are vastly inferior to the actual Din Tai Fungs in China and um, and Taiwan. So obviously we have a little different version, but you can try some somewhat authentic soup dumplings here in our area. There's also Dough Zone, which is way better, but that's I'll go on a tangent on that later in class. Tong Yuan. So, and bear with me as I butcher all these words. It's a dessert of chewy balls made with glutinous rice flour. Okay, so a really starchy rice flour that makes really chewy um, rice doughs. Okay, and it's served in a hot broth or a syrup. They're usually filled with stuff. So if you look, these two are filled with black sesame. They can be filled with things like bean pastes or peanut butter or stuff like that. Okay, um, and they can also be fried too. But I think it's more common, as far as I've seen, to have them be served in hot syrup like this. Okay, really chewy, quite sweet, and interesting textural contrast when you eat them. So in the West, we have the Sichuan province, and this is a picture of Chengdu, which is the big city in the Sichuan province, um, and pandas because they're known for pandas. But Sichuan is the region known for its fragrant peppercorns. So if you ever heard of a Sichuan peppercorn, that comes from here, obviously. When you eat a Sichuan peppercorn, it has like this delayed reaction. At first, you really don't think anything's happening, and then it starts to numb your mouth, right? So Sichuan is known for numbing and spicy dishes. All right, it's the characteristic of the region. It's very vigorous and zesty food, and the term for that is mala. You can find it in your study guide, right? Sichuan cuisine is known for its mala. It's numbing and it's hot spice. There's Sichuan peppercorn and there's chilies in a lot of the food. Not all Sichuan dishes are spicy, but it's, in my opinion, it's for sure a focal point of the cuisine. Okay, so this is one of my favorite foods like ever. I think it's probably my favorite Chinese food. As I was making this PowerPoint, I was like salivating when I was getting these pictures, but it's a braised dish of soft tofu, usually with some type of meat, whether it be a pork or beef product. The tofu sits in a spicy bright red sauce that's flavored with fermented black beans and fermented soybean chili paste, right? So dochi or dosi is the fermented black beans, and then douban or doubanjiang is the fermented chili and soybean paste, right? So those are big things you find in Sichuan food. Is for sure douban, that spicy paste. And if you remember Korea, we know about some spicy soybean pastes already. So that's another parallel we can draw. But usually this is made pretty spicy, sitting in that hot oil, and it's just delicious. I'm a big fan. Eat it with rice. Okay, dandanmian. So this is another spicy dish. It's a noodle dish consisting of minced pork, chili oil, Sichuan peppercorns, and scallions. Usually, sometimes there's other things added like fermented or preserved mustard greens. That's a lot. That's something you notice a lot in Sichuan food. I think the story goes, and I'm probably remembering this wrong. I didn't prepare to tell it, but I think it's called dan dan noodles because people used to walk around with a stick on their back, and there was two buckets. There was one bucket of noodles and then one bucket of the spicy sauce. And as they walked through the city, it would make a dan 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 sound as the buckets were swinging back and forth, right? So normally, you get the noodles on bottom and the sauce on top, and then you mix them really well, like you see here. You would have to mix that. It's something that's becoming more common for us to see in America, but this is for sure a Sichuan thing. And again, really delicious, really bold, quite spicy, and it's all about that mala, that numbing and that hot spice. And then I think the one that we all have seen before, but maybe not the OG version of it, is kung pao chicken. Okay, so for some reason, just all our American Chinese food turned into something that's like soy sauce laden and sweet. But that's not what this is. Okay. The traditional Sichuan version is made with diced chicken that's been seasoned with some soy sauce and Shaoxing rice wine. And then it's stir fried with chilies, Sichuan peppercorns, leeks, and peanuts, right? Sometimes it's leeks, sometimes it's scallions. I think every picture here has scallions instead of leeks, but you can use both. So again, it's Sichuan food. It's spicy. If it has that Sichuan peppercorn, it's going to have that mala, that numbing, and the hot spice. And it's not like a super sweet and sticky thing like most people think about Americanized Chinese food, right? But Kung Pao chicken is a Sichuan thing. All right. So we're going to move on to the Cantonese region. So I believe this is a picture of Guangzhou down in the southern region of China. And generally speaking, southern cooking is the least greasy of all the regional styles. You'll find that Chinese food has a lot of oil um, as a part of the cooking process, whether it's something fried or something that's seasoned with type of oil, or there would be oil throughout the cooking process. Okay. In the South, they really excel in stir frying, which is a tiny bit of oil, super high heat, and a wok. The most known Cantonese thing is dim sum, probably, and that's the first thing we'll talk about. But if we talk about the first people to emigrate from China out into America and other regions of the world, they came from the Cantonese region in the mid 19th century. Okay. While the country was somewhat on lockdown and it was kind of hard to get in and out, the government in Beijing was far away and too weak in the south to stop the southern people from leaving. So that's like the first mass immigration out of China was the southern people, the Cantonese people, whether it means going to Taiwan or going anywhere else. So dim sum, the literal translation for dim sum, and it's rough, is touch the heart, which I always thought was interesting. Dim sum is an extremely large range of foods that can be served for a Cantonese breakfast or lunch. Right? It's not the only thing that Cantonese people eat for breakfast. We'll talk about some other stuff in class, but it's the one we know of the most. A dim sum restaurant will have carts holding many bamboo steamers and dishes with various dumplings, rolls, buns, rice cakes or noodles, meat, seafood, vegetable, and rice dishes. Okay, so there's a ton of variety. I tried to show like how much variety there can be by just showing all these pictures, but I mean, if you ever been to a dim sum restaurant, you know there's just constant food being served. Servers roll up the carts to large round tables, and the diners will pick and choose what they want to eat. Pretty simple, really, really awesome meal. Again, we love meals like this because there's variety while you're eating, right? It's not boring. There's lots of different things coming at you. And in dim sum, there's a ton of variety in their dishes. It's not just one, it's not just dumplings, it's not just noodles, it's everything. Okay? Char siu. So, this is the Cantonese method for preparing barbecued pork products. If we're talking like the old school way, traditionally, the pork was marinated with honey, dark soy sauce, this special type of tofu that's red fermented tofu. It's fermented with the type of yeast that comes from red rice. So if you've ever seen red fermented tofu, it's like bright red on the outside. And hoisin sauce and five spice, and we'll talk about five spice and hoisin sauce at the end of this. Okay. The old school way again, the marinated pork is like pronged with a fork, or like stuck with a fork and then hung over an open fire or smoke. So if we see the fake version of char siu, they use like red dye on the outside, and that's what kind of makes it look red, like it was smoked. But if you do it the normal way and you make that marinade and it has the soy sauce around it, and then you smoke it, it gets red through the smoking process. Okay, so if you ever see like really cheap char siu in a Safeway or something that's bright red on the outside, it's fake-ish, right? There's red food coloring on the outside. That being said, some of the real OG people use red food coloring too now. It's just available. It's kind of synonymous with the style, with the Chinese barbecue or the Cantonese barbecue. So that's char siu. Okay. Again, this is another thing that I'm generalizing with, right? Because when we think of Hainanese chicken rice, that's super obnoxious. When we think of Hainanese chicken rice, you don't always think of China, right? It's a big thing in Singapore or Malaysia, but it is a Southern Chinese thing. Okay, so Hainanese chicken rice is a dish of poached chicken that's served with chili and soy condiments, and usually some type of vegetable garnish. Like you see cucumber often, and then sometimes you'll see tomatoes as well. The way they make it is really interesting. So the whole chicken is poached in a broth, and then after the chicken is done cooking, they'll pull the chicken out, and then they'll cook the rice in the broth. So the rice is like chicken flavored rice. Okay, and then the meat is carved and then served with that chicken flavored rice, and you have it with all your condiments. Um, Again, this is the Chinese thing, but when we think of like Singapore or Malaysian food, like it's also another one too. But again, one more time, it is the Southern Chinese food. Okay, so this is a huge portion of what's important right here is the wok, and I'm covering it up, but wok hei, okay? But let's just talk about the wok first before we get into that. So woks are super versatile. You can basically do every type of cooking or Chinese cooking technique in there. You can poach, boil, steam, stir fry, deep fry, smoke. Um, I'm probably missing some other stuff. You can bake it if you put salt or sand into it. You can turn it into a baking dish. It's super versatile. It does everything. So the wok is bowl shaped, having a rounded bottom and flared sides, like you can see, obviously. They come in a variety of sizes, but the normal one is about 20 inches in diameter. You'll notice that there's two handles. You can see that this person's holding a handle here and there's a handle on the other side. Usually, there's like a method to flicking the wok and using that spoon at the same time, right, to keep things moving. While the wok can be made of different metals like aluminum, copper, or stainless steel, the most common one is carbon steel or black steel, and it's preferred because of its heat conducting qualities. Right, the uh, the metal is a good conductor, and you can also make it really thin. So what does that mean? The pan can get super super hot, and that's exactly what you want for wok cookery. Okay, because it's carbon steel, the pan needs to be seasoned a lot, which means that it needs to be cleaned and cooked at a really high temperature, and then have a thin film of oil around it. Usually peanut oil, I think, is the normal one, but that's how it's seasoned, right? They rub it with oil and they constantly clean it. Okay, so again, the wok gets at really high heats. Now, one extremely important Chinese culinary term is this right here, wok hei. Okay, and it refers to the complex charred aroma that comes from cooking food at a really, really high heat in a wok. It's hard to explain, but if you've eaten like really good Chinese food, you know that, oh, this was cooked in a wok because it has this essence, right? It has this charred aroma, and it's not something you can get from another type of cooking method. Okay. Um, that's the beauty of like stir frying and wok cookery in general, is that it's cooked at such a high heat. It gives us a lot of different flavor profile that we would get from another type of heat source or cooking vessel. So remember wok hei, okay? The essence of wok cookery, in my opinion. There's a whole lot of other things that are important, but the bamboo steamer is a big one. So bamboo steamers allow layers of food to be surrounded and cooked by steam. Is comprised by a set of interlocking and nesting straight-sided bamboo sections. Okay, so you can stack them up because they have an open bottom, and you just put a lid on top to cover it. Okay, so it can be used in conjunction with a wok. These are commercial steamers in Chinese restaurants, but you can put a wok with a little bit of water in it, and then put your bamboo steamers on top of it. Food to be steamed is placed on the grids of each section, right? So it's put on the grids right here, and the sections are placed on top of each other, forming a big cylinder or chimney for the steam to pass through. The lid is placed on top to contain the steam, and then the cooking process takes place. There's also these types of steamers where you can put the bamboo steamers right on top of it, and then there's also big commercial steaming ovens where it's just a rotating, circulating steam oven, and you just throw your stuff into there as well. Okay, so the bamboo steamer is huge. Lots of steamed food in Chinese cooking. All right, let's get into some of the flavoring ingredients. So we kind of talked about it a little bit, but remember, all these East Asian cultures use fermented soybean pastes, but they're in different ways. So these are the three big fermented soybean products that I could think of. Dosi or dochi is the fermented black bean. They're fermented and salted black beans. You'll see them a lot in Chinese cooking. Um, Huangdojang, which is the yellow soybean paste. When we talked about Jiajiangmen, it was that fried sauce noodle that's made with the yellow soybean paste. Okay, and then this is the one that's synonymous with Sichuan cuisine, right? Doubanjiang, which is it's the spicy one that's a fermented paste of broad beans and chilies. Okay, so you'll find more variety of different types of beans used to ferment or to make these products in Chinese cooking than you would in others, in my opinion. I think there's maybe more variety in their fermented bean pastes in China, and they're all used for different purposes, like they would be in any other culture. But yeah, these are the big three that I could think of. So lots of condiments. When we think of like French food, the normal, not normal, but the conventional Western style of building flavor, we think about it through like building flavor through time and long processes, right? In Chinese food, I think a lot of sauces are built through condiments. They use a lot of condiments to flavor things, which is a pretty fast way of doing it. And as long as your condiments are high quality, you're still making good stuff. So again, these are the big ones that I think of. There's a lot more, but these are the big ones in my opinion. Hoisin sauce, which is a thick and fragrant sauce used to flavor marinades or anything in Chinese cooking. Right? You can make sauces out of it. You can use it to flavor soups, things like that. It's dark and sweet with a deep and complex flavor. There's a lot of different regional variants or commercial variants on how you make hoisin sauce, but it often has soybeans, five spice, sugar, and vinegar. Okay, those are kind of the building blocks. Now, some people will add actual fennel to it instead of fennel seed, or they'll have other spices, or they'll use different type of vegetables in there. But those are the big things. Just think hoisin is sweet, thick, complex, and it has some warming spice, some Chinese five spice in there, which we will talk about later. Oyster sauce, which is another thick and dark condiment, but it's made from oyster flavor or oyster extract, sugar, salt, and then usually a starch to thicken it. I would say always a starch to thicken it. It's quite thick, and you can tell it's thickened with starch, not with evaporation. Oyster sauce is a common flavor ingredient in many Chinese dishes. You'll see it a lot. Okay, so these two together are a really good combo. And then the last one I wanted to include was obviously soy sauce, which is I mean, to explain it, but it's obvious. It's a dark and salty liquid made from fermented soybean pastes, right? They add salt and then a type of roasted wheat or grain to help ferment the process, and then it's turned into that liquid. Okay, so in this class for China, we're going to focus on four. There you go. Four main Chinese soy sauces. Okay, there's light soy sauce, which is the most common variety in China. It's used for everything. Okay, stir fried dishes, marinades, soups, dipping sauces, anything. Light soy sauce is the most common variety. There's also dark soy sauce, which is darker and aged longer than light soy sauce. Obviously, it's a little bit more deeper in flavor, a little bit more complex. And dark soy sauce is used for things like those red braised dishes. If you remember Hong Shao Rou, that red braised pork belly, um, dark soy sauce will help turn things into that red braise. Okay. Another one is mushroom soy sauce. So it's a soy sauce that's infused with dried mushrooms, and it's usually dried Chinese straw mushrooms. It's used to give dishes a more earthy flavor. and they use it in place of dark soy sauce sometimes. So if you have a mushroom dish and you want to use a dark soy sauce, you'd probably use mushroom soy sauce. And then the last one is thick soy sauce, and I'll try to buy some this weekend and show you on Monday. But it's a very thick and sweeter version of soy sauce. It usually has added sugar and more roasted wheat in the fermentation process, and even sometimes they add a starch thickener on top of that to make it really thick. Thick soy sauce is used in some fried rice and noodle dishes. I've definitely seen it in lots of noodle dishes before, like seafood noodles. They oftentimes will have some thick soy sauce. Yeah, and it's great. And again, I'm generalizing here, but you can use more thick soy sauce than you could more of a thin or dark soy sauce or a light or dark soy sauce. It's less salty. That thick soy sauce is a lot less salty, in my opinion. Okay, so vinegars and rice wines. All right, so lots of vinegar in Chinese cuisine, and the types they use are a little specific. So the red vinegar is one that you'll see. It's not as common as this black vinegar, but the red vinegar is made from red yeast rice. So it's a variety of fermented rice that gives the vinegar a bright red color. It's made from rice, okay? There's also the Chin King vinegar. I'm saying that wrong. I don't know how to say it, but it's the black vinegar that's made from rice, and it's widely used in Chinese cuisine. It has a really deep and complex flavor profile and a sharp acidity. I would say that it's not similar to any other vinegar you probably ever tasted. The first time I had it, it was you're almost like, I don't know if I like that, but as you learn how to use it correctly and then eat it with the right stuff, I think it's really delicious. And then the last thing, these are all rice products, right? And then the last thing is Shaoxing rice wine, which you'll find very commonly in Chinese cooking. It's used in a wide array of dishes. It's very um, important to the Chinese flavor profile, and a lot of things that you're like, why does this taste so good? It's because it's a whole mix of all the things that are usually in there with like your rice wine, your soy sauce, and those other condiments. That's what makes that delicious Chinese flavor profile. Okay, Shaoxing rice wine. So five spice. You've heard me say it a few times, or the five fragrances, which is also called. It's a blend of Sichuan peppercorn, fennel seed, Chinese cinnamon, and if we're talking, what we normally think of cinnamon is like the warming spice that you'll find in baked goods, or like if you have horchata, that's like you're thinking, oh, that's that cinnamon flavor. Chinese cinnamon is spicier, I would say, and I would say think about like Red Hots or Big Red chewing gum. If you've ever had that, that's like Chinese cinnamon flavor. It's fake, but it's like trying to have that flavor. Chinese cinnamon is more bold, spicy, kind of a more aggressive spice flavor. Okay, so Sichuan peppercorn, fennel seed, Chinese cinnamon, star anise, which is a really delicious warming spice. I think it's my favorite spice ever. And then clove, which is another warming spice, but it's very, very strong. So you have to use clove really carefully when you use it. But that's the five fragrances. We won't get it too much into this unit, but Chinese food really does have an aspect of like holistic medicine involved. There's this thing called traditional Chinese medicine, and a lot of foods will try to incorporate some of those medicinal ingredients um, to give it a healthy aspect, right? Using those traditional Chinese medicine methods. So there's five spices, and then there's also five um, medicinal spices as well. And I can't remember them off the top of my head. I'll try to figure that out and send it to you. I think like angelica root is one of them, and maybe like some type of anise. But yeah, so remember that it's really they use spices not only for flavor but also for holistic means. And then oil. So I said oil is a big part of Chinese cookery. I think the most commonly used oil is peanut oil. There's also things like rice bran oil, but that's a little bit more, I would say, Japanese, but they do use it in China. Or they could use normal vegetable oils and stuff like that too. But peanut oil is the big one for your frying and your stir frying and stuff like that. Okay. Sesame oil, which is made from roasted sesame seeds, is another big one, and that's a flavoring oil, right? It's not one to use for cooking. You don't want to put sesame oil on really high heat because it'll burn and it'll ruin the flavor, right? But it's kind of a finishing oil. It's used to finish things and give it that sesame flavor. Now, here's the big one, the chili oil. Okay, so chili oil is an infused product that's made with dried flaked chilies or whatever type of chili you want. To be honest, there's an almost endless variety of Chinese chili oils made with different types of techniques and different types of chilies. And when I mean there's a lot, I mean there's a lot of different types of chili oil. Okay. One thing I found out is like when there's like a family recipe, they'll put a picture of one of their family members on that label. So you'll see that a lot, like different old pictures of people from that family that make that chili oil product. So it can be a big proprietary thing if you have a popular chili oil. But again, there's a ton of different types of chili oils coming from the more aromatic, flavorful side of things to the more brutally spicy, just hot um, portion of the chili oil spectrum. But again, this is not a thing that you want to cook on high heat because it'll burn. It's just like sesame oil, it's a flavoring component. All right. And with that, that's it. So I'll post this up on Canvas and then I'll post some cooking videos and we'll be good. We'll get started on Monday. So thank you, and I'll see you soon.